When you've agreed to facilitate a training, whether for your service unit, work, or anywhere in life, it can feel stressful. There are a lot of steps to remember to ensure your training runs smoothly. We're hoping that this training will help you walk through the process and help you feel more comfortable as a facilitator. Here's our agenda. We're going to talk about preparing for a meeting, your presence during a meeting, engaging people in person and virtually, dealing with challenging participants, evaluation and debrief, and our fast fundamentals. There are lots of things to remember when preparing for your training or meeting. Do you have a meeting place? If you aren't doing the training at your regular service unit meeting, do you have a meeting place secured? Is it accessible? Does it have appropriate restrooms and space for everyone who will be there? Next are your materials. Do you have a list of all the materials you'll need, like pens, sign-in sheets, training aids, any resources that you might want to pass out, any of that stuff? Will the space provide a projector and a screen? Will they have the appropriate cords you'll need to plug into a TV or smart board or whatever it is you're going to be using to present? These are all things to have prepared or ask the venue before the day of your event. Once you have the materials, you need to make sure to gather them before the day of your event. It will help you in the long run to have the materials prepped ahead of time. And then practice, practice, practice. Make sure that you've practiced what you'll be facilitating. It will help with any anxiety surrounding the training. And if people have questions while you're facilitating, you'll be better prepared to answer them if you have practiced the material beforehand. Get to your meeting space early. It will give you the time you need to set up your materials and maybe even practice a little bit. Getting there early will also help with the before training nerves that you may be experiencing. Your presence is going to be one of the most important parts of any training. You want to be open and inviting. If someone comes to a training and they don't feel welcome, they won't want to come back. We also have to remember that a lot of people coming to our trainings that we host are brand new and have never done Girl Scouts before. So we need to be aware of the language that we use. Try to avoid any abbreviations. And if you use words like service unit, community development manager, etc., make sure that we're explaining what those are. Two ways that we can ensure we're remaining open and inviting is by being aware of our verbal and nonverbal communication. Here are some ways we can work on our verbal communication. Be clear in what you want to express. What is it that you want everyone to understand? Sometimes we spend more time talking around the matter than we do on the matter itself. So make sure that you're prepared to speak on your topic directly and have a clear understanding on how to communicate that to others. Choose your words carefully. Good verbal communication requires us to choose our words precisely. Words carry meaning, right? So we want to be sure that we know our audience and are using words that they can clearly understand. Be aware of your tone. Your tone can make or break a presentation. Tone doesn't just include your voice volume, but the emotions expressed as well. If you don't seem excited about the topic you're presenting on, your participants won't be excited either. Be an active listener. The art of training is a two-way street. If you aren't listening to your participants and gaining feedback from them, you run the risk of the participants tuning out. Have you ever been to a conversation and it feels like somebody already has a canned response to your question even before you fully asked your question? That's what we want to avoid. So take the time to slow down and listen to the participants. It's one of the best ways we can engage them during our training. Next, we have our nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication is extremely important. It's said that 80% of our communication is nonverbal, and that speech only accounts for about 20 to 30%. So your facial expressions, eye contact, hand gestures, and posture are all vital to giving an effective presentation. Your body movement can reinforce or emphasize what you're teaching. The participants will pick up on your body language even without realizing it, which means while you are presenting, their brains will mirror your emotional state. So it's super important to be excited about what you're teaching. We want to show people that we're excited, but we also don't want to oversell it. Then we could seem ingenuine. It is a fine line that we walk. If you're talking too fast, or gesturing with your hands too much, it can seem like you aren't confident in the material or just want the training to be over. If you're gesturing too little or not at all, it can make you seem cold, distant, or unenthusiastic. There are 3 types of body movements that will be helpful during a presentation. We have gestures that provide a visual image for whatever you are trying to convey. So an example of this would be showing the size or shape of something. Then we have hand gestures that have an actual meaning in words, and that can be a thumbs up, an okay, or you can show a number. Then we have any expressions or gestures that provide feedback or show meaning without needing verbal communication, and that could be anything like a head nod. When it comes to body language, there are some do's and don'ts that we should always follow. What we want to do is be relaxed and casual. Have you ever been to a training where the facilitator was so on edge, you yourself started to feel uptight as well? Me too. And we want our participants to be comfortable in their learning environment. It's going to give them the best space to learn. Move with purpose. If you find that there's no gesture to fit what you're trying to say, then there probably isn't. Don't be afraid to stand still when you feel it's necessary. Not every sentence will need a gesture. Use natural gestures. If you don't normally make a hand gesture, don't start now. It may feel awkward to you and in turn feel awkward to the participants. Make eye contact. Like we mentioned earlier, it doesn't have to be a staring contest, but make sure you are making eye contact with each participant. It helps get your point across and gives them more buy-in to your training. And we want to stand straight, but not stiff. So we want to make sure we have good posture. We don't want to look like a statue, but we want to make sure that we're appearing confident and excited about our material. So here are some things that we don't want to do when it comes to body language. We don't want to pace. Some movement while you're facilitating is fine, but we want to make sure that we're not pacing. Pacing can make you appear nervous about the material and cause your participants to feel uncomfortable. We want to make sure we're not turning to nervous gestures. So try to avoid nail biting, fidgeting, or touching your hair, things like that. If you do find that you have a nervous gesture, find something else to replace that nervous gesture so you don't give off a nervous air to your participants. Make sure that we're not keeping our hands in our pockets or behind our back. Hand gestures help keep our presentations interesting. When we hold our hands in our pockets or behind our backs, it hinders us from remaining open and inviting with the participants. And don't look at the floor. Eye contact is so important. When we spend the training looking at the floor, we miss the opportunity to connect with our participants and really drive our points home. So now we're going to talk about engaging people in person and virtually. The hardest part of training is probably keeping people engaged. If people aren't engaged, they aren't going to get what they need from the training. So here are some tips to help. Use activities. Including activities in your training is a great way to help keep people engaged. It gets them up and moving while also being related to the topic. It also allows for an easy way to put some fun into your presentation. Create visuals. An easy way to spruce up a training or presentation is visuals. It gives the participants something to look at other than just you or words on a screen. Some examples of visuals could be a video, a PowerPoint presentation. You could even use a knot board or compasses if you're doing something like an outdoor training. Make sure we're asking questions. When you sprinkle questions throughout your training, it can help gauge if the participants are understanding and offer them a chance to share, which will keep them engaged. Know your audience. Take a minute before your training to get to know your audience. Will it be all Girl Scout troop leaders, Girl Scout parents, or maybe just girls? This will help you speak towards their experience and keep things relatable. And on that topic, we want to chat about personal experience. This goes right along with knowing your audience. When you know your audience, you can connect their personal experiences with the training and allow participants to share with each other to help gain knowledge and understanding. Prepare handouts. Handouts can be helpful in many ways. It gives participants a place to keep notes and provide a visual aid to your material. Sometimes trainers will even leave parts of the handouts blank, so participants have to pay attention and fill in the answers. This will ensure that participants are invested in your training. We want to keep things concise. Have we ever been to a training where the facilitator drones on and on about a topic that doesn't need that much detail? That's what we want to avoid. Try to keep things as concise as possible while still teaching the material. People will usually use the rule of three, which is just keeping info into groups of three, and it will help to keep things concise. Some examples of this: in CPR and first aid training, we have check, call, care. And when we're talking about fire safety, we have stop, drop, and roll, things like that. So now we're going to jump over to engaging people virtually. So here's how we're going to engage people virtually. Some of the ways that we engage people in person are the same as we do virtually. We're still going to use activities, visuals, questions, and handouts, but we also want to know our audience and discuss their personal experiences as well. So here are some ways we can engage people virtually that are different than in person. You may need to tell participants exactly how to engage. If you want them to use the chat log or unmute to call out their answers, make sure they know that. Start with an engaging activity and require participation. This will set the tone that you're expecting participation in your training. And keep your engagement simple. Ask them to answer a question in the chat log or just answer a yes or no question. When discussing personal experiences, ask 2 or 3 people specifically to speak. This will show participants that they need to be prepared to speak, and it will keep them engaged. Now we're going to discuss dealing with difficult participants. This can be the most anxiety-inducing part of any facilitating. When you know what to expect and how to combat it, you can go in confident and prepared to take on any challenge that's thrown your way. So here are some types of difficult participants. We have the know-it-all. You may have participants that feel they know more about the topic than you do. The best strategy to deal with this is to just let it happen. Instead of fighting them on it, involve them. Allow them to share their information. Contributing will allow them to feel as if they are on your side and not competing against you. Then we have the sidebar. This is when 2 or more participants are having a side conversation during your presentation. There are a few ways we can put a stop to this without calling anyone out directly. A couple of options that are more subtle are walking by them or glancing at them while you're presenting. You could even ask them to share their thoughts. If they continue to talk over other participants who are trying to share, just remind everyone that we are in a respectful learning space and will be giving everyone our full attention. If none of these tactics work, you can kindly ask them to save their conversation until after the training. Then we have the center of attention. If you find that one person in your training wants to be the center of attention, give them a role. That will help alleviate their need for the spotlight. You could ask them to write on the board, run the slides if you have a PowerPoint, hand out materials, or even take notes for your training. Then we have the dominator. This is the most disruptive type of participants. They are the ones who go off on tangents, try to steal the show, and just don't know when to stop talking. These participants need to be dealt with directly. An approach you can use to help in this situation is intruding. This is where you jump into their statement to ask a question or highlight a topic that's relevant. So an example of this, if you're giving an outdoor training and our participant goes on a tangent about camping, and you hear them talk about camping safety, you could jump in and say, has everybody taken their safety training? And that will help you gain control of the conversation. And then after you've gained control of the conversation, we want to make sure that we remind participants of the time constraints on the training and how we want to be respectful of everyone's time. Our next difficult participant is the clown. This participant will tell unnecessary jokes or make light of heavy subjects. While this type of behavior can bring some levity to your presentation, it can get out of control very quickly. Here are some ways we can combat this type of behavior. Use your body language and eye contact to let someone know when enough is enough. You could also leverage the behavior after a tough task or after taking a break. You can even have a chat with them just to make sure they are getting what they need to from your presentation. And if all else fails, you can give them a role so they are too busy to continue being disruptive. There are many other types of difficult participants, and we could talk about them all day. But these tactics above that we just discussed should help in almost any difficult participant situation. So now we're going to chat a little bit about evaluation and debrief. We know that evaluation and debrief are 2 of the most important parts of our Girl Scout program, and our adult trainings are no different. Debriefing with adults is very similar to debriefing with girls. It doesn't have to be difficult. Just set aside some time to ask participants what their favorite part of your training was or their favorite thing that they learned. This can be a huge takeaway for them, and it gives you an understanding of how the training went that day. Girl Scouts is a research-based organization, and that means we evaluate everything we do. These event evaluations help us assess our programs, success, and needs as a team and a council. We have both a paper evaluation and online evaluation link available to use. The paper evaluation form will be found on the Google Drive once you have access. If you're using this, please either drop off or scan it to your local troop support manager. If you have an iPhone, you can scan by using the Notes app that comes on the phone. The online eval is great because it provides more anonymity and the report goes directly to staff. We will share any pertinent information or feedback with you that we get from the surveys, and this link will also be found on the Google Drive. And lastly, we want to take just a second to point out our Fast Fundamentals. These are short 15 to 20-minute trainings that you can do with your service units that have already been written for you. They've been designed so you can use them for 3 years. And each Fast Fundamental, there are 3 activities. If you use one activity each time you do the training, you could potentially do the training 3 times and it will be different each time. Some of the topics that we have: community service versus take action, conflict resolution, GSWO resources, investiture and rededication, and WAGs, and those are just a few. We have a facilitator's guide you can use to learn how to use Fast Fundamentals to their full potential. You can also contact your local troop support manager if you have any questions or need some tips on facilitating. All right, so we have come to the end of our training today. If anyone has any questions afterwards, you can go ahead and contact your community development manager or your troop support manager.